Hello, welcome or welcome back. My name is Ari and you're here for my mid-month wrap-up. So far in April, I have read 9 books and DNF'd 2 books, and 9 books is a little bit low for me, but my average per book right now is over 400 pages because for some reason my TBR jar is cursed and I keep pulling long books. So I'm currently have 5 books over 400 pages. 2 of those are over 500 pages and 1 of them's over 700 pages. So I've just been reading long books this month. It's fine. I like long books. I'm just cursed. Y'all know how this works. So first I am going to go over the 2 books I DNF'd because if I just go through them as I read them, I'm going to forget about the books that I DNF'd because I don't record them with the books that I actually read. So starting there. The first book I DNF'd this month is Machinehood by S.B. Divya? Sure. And this is a new release book, and I DNF'd it for a very personal reason to me, something that you might not have problems with at all, but one of the subject matter in this book, it's kind of like a side thing. It's not like the main plot of the book, but it talks about anti-abortion rhetoric through the Catholic religion. And basically a woman gets pregnant and her husband apparently is required to sign off on her getting an abortion, so she does not have power over her own body, and he refuses to allow her to have an abortion because he's Catholic, even though she's not Catholic. And that type of thing just pisses me off in general. I am a firm believer that women should have power over their own bodies, and their husbands should never get a say in what happens to a woman's body, regardless of the relationship. I mean, a good marriage, yes, they would talk about it, and yes, they would have that discussion, and yes, it would be a joint decision. But I don't think the government has any say in what a married couple should be able to make of that joint decision. And honestly, that just pissed me off so much that I didn't want to continue reading on in the book. The subject matter of this book is like android rights. So the universe is, this is a futuristic dystopian type book, and most of the work is done by machines, and then the humans kind of babysit the machines because machines are supposed to be like, they're intelligent because they're intelligent machines, but they're not supposed to be like thinking for themselves type of intelligence. And the machinehood comes out in like, they're a terrorist organization that wants rights for machines. So that's what the plot was as far as I can determine. I did not get very far in the book. You can see right there is where I DNF'd it. So in the reviews of this online seem to be very good. So if you like that dystopian robot rights type of things, you may really like this book. This was an entire personal reason to DNF it. The other book I DNF'd this month is The Lonely Hearts Hotel by Heather O'Neill, and this one I guess is technically a personal reason that I DNF'd it, but this one was like a that's fucked up and gross, and I never want to read about that in a book ever. This one does have a very, very strong trigger warning on here for the sexual assault of a child, so if you are like done right there with those lines, please skip ahead to when I put this book down. But basically, this book is about 2 orphan children who, I don't know, join a circus and fall in love. I never got to the circus part. I never got to the fall in love part. They were both like very, very young children who never really talked to or knew each other when I DNF'd this book. But there is a graphic on-page rape of a 11-year-old boy in here. Like, you get the details of the rape as if it was like a romance sex scene from a smutty novel, but it is a 20-something-year-old woman sexually assaulting an 11-year-old child. And I don't want to read that. I don't know why anybody would want to read that. And I'm sure, or I'm not sure, but in all probability, like, they went on to deal with his trauma from his sexual assault, but I never, ever, ever want to read on page a detailed description of a sexual assault of a child. Ever. So I was like, nope. Nope. Alright, now that we've gotten the DNFs out of the way, let's go through the actual books that I've read. First, I'm going to give you a summary, then I'm going to tell you my feelings, then I'm going to tell you if there's any rep or any trigger warnings, and then finally, my star rating. So the first book that I read this month is Blackfish City by Sam J. Miller. This is a dystopian book where the ice caps have melted and basically society as we know it is fallen apart. Humankind, mankind, whatever, exist in like small groups of people that live in individual cities, and each one of these cities is governed by like a capitalist organization. It's not like governments as we know it today, even though, I mean, the US government is basically a capitalist organization at this point, but they don't pretend to differentiate in these. This takes place in a man-made island city off the coast of Iceland that was made using the same technology they used to do deep sea oil wells, basically. And this city, and at the beginning of the book, this woman known as the Orcamancer shows up riding an orca with a polar bear. And you're like, what? And then she proceeds to not be one of the main characters in this book at all. We have 4 different perspective characters in here, none of which are this Orcamancer lady. She has 1 chapter in the middle of the book. That's it. And she's like a side character, and you hear about her every once in a while, but she is really not the plot of the book at all. And basically all it goes through is talking about like how these characters get together and like how these 4 really separate different people who don't seem to be connected in any way are actually connected in a stupid way, because I didn't like this book. The plot overall, I'm not really going to go into it, but it kind of fell flat for me. Like, I didn't like the ending. I thought it was a bit weird. I didn't understand a lot of the characters' motivations at all. I wasn't attached to any of them, and it just seemed like hollow, I guess. And normally that would drop it down to a 3-star, but the next thing I say has to do with trigger warnings. In this book, there is a sexually transmitted disease that, although the symptoms are not anything at all like AIDS or HIV, the like stigma around it and how they treat people who have this disease is very reminiscent of the AIDS epidemic in the early 90s, where people like are afraid to even touch somebody who is diagnosed with this STD, and there is no known cure at the time for it. Basically, if you contract this STD, you're going to die within 4 to 6 months. And what it actually does is like makes you hear voices, or you have memories of other people's memories that you've never experienced. And somehow over time, all these memories and all these voices like make you lose brain function. It's not really detailed explained, but one of the 4 main characters that we have in this book has this disease, knows he has this disease, knows that he has 4 to 6 months to live, and willingly has unprotected sex with another human being without ever even slightly mentioning or slightly pausing. And basically after he has sex with him, he's like, I just killed this person. I should feel more than what I do. And what? That was just fucked up. And it was never addressed that what this man chose to do was like a horrific action. It was just like, oh, the person he gave the STD to is going to be, or the book is going to end long before the person that he gave this STD to is going to die. So what the fuck do we care? Like, hey, that guy was kind of an asshole. Maybe we're not going to really address this. And I was not okay with that at all. So yuck on that. This does have a lot of rep for queer rep. One of the characters is non-binary, and one of the characters is a gay man. And I don't think there were any, oh yeah, there were a lesbian couple in here too. Kind of main characters, like not perspective characters, but main characters, if that makes sense. Was it a lesbian couple? And queerness is just accepted. It's not like, no one's going to like mention like, oh, you're non-binary? Tell me about this. Like, question anything. It's just like, hey, this person's non-binary. My pronouns are they, them. And then everybody's like, great. And then proceeds to, without complaint, without comment, calls them they or them. For star rating, I ended up giving this 2 stars. Next up, I read an arc called Women Don't Owe You Pretty by Florence Given. This is a non-fiction book that I thought was going to kind of be a lot about, like, feminist movements or whatever, like the feminist movement, give you like good information on being like a ally or a feminist or whatever. But all of the feminist information is very, very basic. There's nothing new. There's nothing that somebody without like, or there's nothing that somebody who doesn't have like a remote sense of intelligence or like any woman ever in existence is going to learn from this. This is like extremely basic as far as the feminist stuff, but it's also self-help, and I hate self-help. And then self-help was very like vague. It's like, you should like yourself more. And it's like, how the fuck is that supposed to help me? So that's already like, okay, this is whatever, not my thing. This is not presenting anything to me. It's also apparently all plagiarized. And the author, Florence Givens, and this is speculation, like I don't have any proof of this, but I've seen, like, after I read this book and I started reading other people's reviews and then like Googling the author on the internet, I found all of this information, and basically she almost word for word plagiarized a Black author while pretending throughout this book to uplift Black women. And so she talks about like all throughout the entire book, like how you should support Black women and Black feminism and everything like that. And this is like a very like generic white woman, and yeah, she apparently just straight up plagiarized a Black woman's information. Instead of uplifting the Black woman, she just plagiarized her. So I highly don't recommend you read this. Just read things by Black women if you want to support Black women. The only really good thing about that I could say about this is the artwork for it was really pretty. But that's definitely not a reason to waste your money on this. Fortunately, I got this as an ARC. I didn't actually purchase it. I have not supported the author while reading this, so I don't feel too bad about not knowing that going in. I still feel a little bit bad because I probably should Google authors more before I just read their books. But yeah, so problematic there. I can say that there is rep for like women and black women in here, but is it really rep if you've just plagiarized the whole thing? Probably not, so I'm gonna say there's no rep. Trigger warnings, I mean, like, general hate towards women, so misogyny is gonna be, like, a lot of the conversations in here discuss misogyny. Still don't think you should read it, so what do you care about the trigger warnings, right? Star rating, I gave this a 2-star, though I probably should have given it a 1-star. I might change my star rating for that, since the author just plagiarized stuff. I mean, like, if she didn't plagiarize it, I would have given it a 2-star. But I think we're gonna change my rating and drop this down to a 1-star. Next, I read Weave the Lightning by Corey R. Lee, and this is a book from a book box. I don't know what book box this came in, but this came from a book box. It was one of the books that I pulled out of the jar this month, and this is a Russian-inspired fantasy novel. I think it's YA. I usually base something, if something is like YA or adult, on the age of the characters, and I'm pretty sure the characters in here are in their, like, late teens. So I'm gonna say it's YA, and this follows a couple of different characters. You have a young girl who is part of a circus, and her family is part of a resistance smuggling ring where they either help smuggle people for the resistance or they smuggle paraphernalia for the resistance. And then the other character, perspective character, is a young man who is like a something mage. I don't remember what they're called. Battle mage, storm mage, something, but he's a magic user, and he is the son of the, like, supreme general or whatever, the leader of this country, and his father is very emotionally abusive, and this, like, world, it's very Russian inspired, but the government is more about, like, overall welfare than individual health. So they are very willing to waste thousands of lives on something very, very small, and winning that very, very small thing or controlling that very, very small thing is worth the lives that are wasted. And how this magic system works is it's based off of lightning, and like the storm mages can, like, channel the lightning and weave it into a object to make that object more powerful. So if you have, like, a knife, or let's use a gun. If you have a gun, you can weave the lightning into the gun and make it where you'll always hit your target with the gun, or something like that, or the gun will never jam, or the gun can only be used by one specific person, like different things like that. And all of the mages are controlled by the government except for our one little chick. She's kind of in hiding and she's not supposed to use her magic, but the storms kind of like don't allow you to not use your magic. It's complicated, but it's interesting. I did very, very much enjoy this story, and I requested an arc for the second book, and got approved for that. So I have the second book ready to read whenever I get a chance. But I very, very much enjoyed this. I thought this was very cool. It doesn't have like the really annoying YA tropes. It does have some YA tropes. It does have the love V. That one doesn't annoy me, but it does annoy a lot of people. So if you hate the idea of a love V, it's very prevalent in this one. And a love V, for those of you who are like, what the fuck is she talking about, is where there's one girl and two guys are in love with that girl and she can't decide which guy she wants. It's not a love triangle because the guys aren't interested in each other. It's just a V. So I like that. Rep I don't think there was any rep in here. I'm not... Oh, there is some rep. The people in this universe choose their own gender. Like, it doesn't matter what gender you were born as, you choose which gender you want to be. None of the main characters, like, chose a gender other than what they biologically present, but everybody has the option to, and your gender is identified by the amount of earrings you wear. So you never have to ask somebody what their pronouns are. You can just look and see how many earrings they wear. And if it's one earring, or I think one earring in each ear, they present as male. And if they wear 2 earrings, they present as female. There doesn't seem to be any options for a non-binary gender. You're either male or female, but it was something. It gave a little bit, if not going the whole way there. So that was decent rep. I gave this 4 stars. Next up, I read The First King of Shannara. I am not going to talk a lot about the Shannara books because I do an entire separate video on these, but this one covers the first king of Shannara, whose name's Gerald Shannara, and the creation of the Sword of Shannara, and the entrance, the I don't know, first time you meet the Warlock Lord in a book, I guess. This was a prequel that was published in like the 90s, when the original Shannara trilogy came out in 77. So this was kind of like, all of this story was kind of mentioned in the Shannara book as things that happened like 500 years before, or I'm sorry, all of this story was mentioned in the Sword of Shannara as things that happened like 500 years before the events of the Sword of Shannara, but this one like actually lets you live them, instead of just being like, oh yeah, this is mythological history. It's fine. It wasn't good. It was like a 3-star. I don't care. There's no rep. General violence, trigger warning type things. And yeah, 3-star. After that, I read The Girl You Left Behind by Jojo Moyes. This is it's a mix of historical fiction and women's lit, I guess. It's not romance. It's kind of romance, but the focus is not on the romance, so I think that makes it women's literature, or contemporary women's lit, and not a contemporary romance. Even though it reads a whole hell of a lot like a contemporary romance, and I hate contemporary romance, so yikes. The historical fiction part of the story takes place in 1911. That could be wrong. It could be like 1906. Somewhere World War I France, in German-occupied France, and it follows a woman whose husband is on the front, but she lives in a town occupied by Germans. And this is World War I, so they are not Nazis. They're just Germans. And they basically are doing the best that they can to survive, and but without like pissing off the Germans and getting killed. So they don't want to support the Germans, but they can only fight back so much. And basically the character makes a deal with a German to hopefully save her husband. But is she making a deal to just screw herself over? That's like the question throughout. I'm not gonna tell you which one because that's a spoiler. And her husband, I should say, is an artist, and he painted a portrait of her that is kind of like central to this story. And in the modern day portion of the story, a woman named Liv, or Liz, her name's Liv. A woman named Liv, her husband gave her Sophie's portrait, Sophie's the girl from France, for a gift for her honeymoon, and then she kind of like treasures that. It's like one of the really nice gifts that her husband gave her, very personalized, even though it's a portrait of somebody else, whatever. And then he passed away 4 years prior to the events of this book. And then Sophie's husband's brother's descendants are claiming that the portrait was stolen during World War I from the family, and the courts, there's like a court case trying to get Liv to, or trying to force Liv to give this portrait back unless she can prove that it wasn't stolen. And so that's like the whole story, is like, was this stolen or was it a gift? We don't know. How the fuck do you prove that so many years later? And yeah, that's basically what the whole book is about. I hated it. It read like a contemporary romance. I hate contemporary romances. But if you like contemporary romances, you'll probably like this. That's all I have to say. Rep. There is fuck all rep in this. Trigger warnings. Any trigger warnings associated with war. There's misogynist trigger warnings, I guess is the best way to put that. So misogyny and war, I think, is basically going to cover that. Star rating, I gave this a 2-star. I still hate contemporary romance. Next up, I read The Midnight Library by Matt Haig. Wow, that was hard to say. This is a story about a woman who is very depressed, and her antidepressants are not really working out, and she has a very bad day where she loses her job, her cat dies, her brother basically says that he hates her, her best friend's not responding to any of her messages, and she decides that she's gonna commit suicide, and does. She ODs on pills, so there's trigger warnings all throughout there about suicide and ODs and depression and stuff like that. And as she lay dying, she goes to the Midnight Library, where a librarian kind of helps her look back on her life and see all of the regrets that she has. And she can choose to go back through her life and pick a different path and potentially like see how her life would have gone if she would have made a different decision. And it's all throughout a discussion of like going through all these different lives that she could have possibly lived, and seeing that no one life is really perfect, and the decisions that you make your life the way it is for a reason, and maybe it's not as bad as you think. I think that's the best way I can describe this without like giving away anything. And basically, eventually she knows that the Midnight Library, as soon as time starts again in the Midnight Library, that either means that she is dying and that's it, or she is waking up. And she's basically like, I chose to commit suicide, I want to die, and I don't want to relive these other lives, I don't care. And it's a fairly short book, but it's very engaging, it's very interesting, and it says a lot of really important things. Now, I am not somebody who suffers from depression or suicidal ideologies. If you are, this probably is not the book for you, because it is very intense on that particular subject matter. If it is something that you feel comfortable reading about, you might like this. And that covers basically the trigger warnings. Rep, her brother is gay. And I think that's it. Her brother is not a main character in this book. So there's a tiny speck of rep, but not really. Star rating, I give this a 4-star. I very, very much enjoyed this book. There's a reason that it's won a lot of awards and that everybody talks about it. Like, it's a very good book. Next up, I read The Sword of Shannara, and when I said I read a book over 700 pages, this is that book. I also fucking hated this. This is budget Lord of the Rings. There are plot points in this book that are word for word the exact same scenes as Lord of the Rings. Or as in Lord of the Rings. Words are hard today. It's not, like, the entire book is not exactly Lord of the Rings. There are things that did not happen in Lord of the Rings that happen in here. There aren't any hobbits, but there are characters that are basically Frodo. Like, Shay Omsford is basically Frodo. Flick Omsford is basically Samwise Gamgee. Alanon is basically Gandalf. Like, it's very easy to draw parallels between the two of them. So if you like Lord of the Rings, you will probably enjoy the Sword of Shannara. I hate the Lord of the Rings, just like I hate everything else this month, apparently. So I didn't like this book, and I struggled to read 700 pages of a book I did not like. I ended up giving this 3 stars because there's literally not anything wrong with this book other than I don't like Lord of the Rings. There is no rep in here because this is fantasy from the 1970s, so they're not representing anything but white people and elves. Trigger warnings, general war fantasy trigger warnings. Like, there's violence, there's a bad guy, people are gonna die, but there's nothing like gratuitous or rapey or anything like that, so you're good. After that, I read Men Explain Things to Me by Rebecca Solnit, and this is a collection of essays that start out with an essay about, like, her experience with men explaining things to her. It's a very, very funny starter essay where she's at a party and she starts talking about like a topic she is very passionate about, and this man interrupts her and he was like, "Have you read this book though?" And she's like, "What?" And he was like, "I don't think you're an expert on this topic. You should read this book. Let me explain this to you." And her friend is like, "She wrote the book, asshole." That's mansplaining. So, it starts with that, and then it goes into, while mansplaining is one of those things that happens a lot, but mostly it's just funny, instead of being, like, really harmful, it's a product of a misogynistic culture that is very harmful. Women are scared to be around men because 1 in 4 women are raped. That's a huge problem. And the rest of the essays kind of discuss, like, just misogyny as a whole. There are quite a few chapters on, like, sexual assault of women, women being afraid of men, rape culture, all that kind of stuff. The problem that I had with this book, and it's not really a problem, but it kind of, like, reduced my need to recommend this, is this was written in 2013 or 2014 is when this was published, so a lot of this stuff is outdated, and she has these, like, big discussions, but using outdated material because this is an older book, so we don't get discussions on, like, the Me Too movement. There isn't any discussions on the giant Cheeto puff that we had as a president, which are, like, really big things that we bring up in these conversations that we have now, and it just feels very weird to read something that doesn't discuss those things, even though this was published before those things happened. So I think even though this is a good resource and I don't have any problems with it, there are more modern resources that are more relevant right now for the same topics. There is a lot of rep about being a woman, trigger warnings, misogyny, rape, assault, all that kind of normal, everyday woman stuff, unfortunately. Star rating, I think I gave this a 3 star. Let me look. I gave this a 4-star. So it was very good. It was just missing that modern take to it. And the final book that I've read so far this month is The Obsidian Tower by Melissa Caruso. This covers a young woman who is part of like this mage family who have this castle called Gloamingard, and in the middle of Gloamingard is an obsidian tower, and on the stones like all around the tower and everything are warnings that the door must remain locked. And the entire purpose of this family is to guard this door. And the main character might accidentally open the door and shit goes down. Her family has this magic where it's like life magic, where they can like grow plants and like tame animals like a Disney princess and stuff like that. And her magic is corrupted, and she kills everything that comes into contact with her. So it's not just like she touches something and thinks about killing them and they die. It's like somebody walks by and accidentally brushes her shoulder and they fall to the ground dead. This goes through clothes, and she also like destroys things in general. So while it's an instantaneous thing, if she touches someone, she like breaks everything. It's like a reverse of life magic, basically. But she's still like part of the family. It's weird. Anyway, this is an adult novel, I'm gonna say, because the main character is 21 years old, but it's got a lot of young adult tropes, and it's got the young adult tropes that I don't particularly care for, which is like bad parenting. Basically, there's a magic in this universe that would allow her to like lock away her magic, and she would be able to like touch people, give affection to people, and her parents decide that they're going to force this 4-year-old child for 17 years to kill anything she touches for political reasons. They don't want to allow her to lock away her magic, which is awful. Like her magic got corrupted when she was 4. She's now 21. And she's literally not been able to touch another human being. She can't walk through a field without killing the grass. If she smells a flower, it dies. She kills everything. And she has been like a walking death since she was 4 years old, forced to like put a mental barrier around herself to make sure somebody doesn't even like accidentally run into her, or else she's going to kill them. And the fact that parents who were supposed to be like governing leaders would do this to a child is the most fucked up thing, because it's very easy. Like when she's 21, she has the option to choose for herself to like use this like bracelet basically to block her power, and she does, and it is like the simplest, easiest solution. And her parents tortured her for those 17 years, not allowing her to do that, which is cruel, and I hate tropes like that. There was another trope that I hate. She's constantly told by others, like, there's this secret about the door to the Obsidian Tower, and there are a couple characters who are like, yes, I know exactly what the Obsidian Tower is and why you can't open the door, but I'm not going to tell you. You just need to blindly trust me and just don't open the door. And she's like, but I accidentally opened the door. What happened? And they're like, well, just don't open the door again. And she's like, no, I kind of need to know these details. Like, there's magic on the loose from here. I need to stop it. Tell me what this is so I can stop it. And they're like, you just don't need to know. And it's like, if somebody would have just been like, hey, this is what you did. This is really bad. Don't do this to try to fix it for this exact reason, there would have, this book wouldn't have existed. And I don't like plots like that, where with a very, very simple conversation, there's no point for the entire fucking book. Not my thing. Rep, the main character is bi, kind of. Well, I guess not kind of. Like, you could be bi and not actually be in a relationship, so that's a really bad way to say it. The main character is bisexual, though she's never been able to act on her desires because she would kill anybody that she tried to be in a relationship in. But she has crushes on both men and women, and there is a non-binary character who is referred to as they, them pronouns, and no one questions it. No one accidentally slips up and says, oh, he or she. It is simply they, them. Everybody accepts it, no questions, no conversation. It's just a general part of the world, which I like. We mentioned this earlier. Overall, I think I gave this, did I give this a 2 or 3 stars? I think I gave it a 3 star because it was just like, I don't like these YA tropes, but there wasn't anything like particularly wrong with the book. I gave this a 3 star, yeah. So it was fine. Meh. Anyway, that's it for this video. Let me know if you've read any of these books down in the comments, or if you plan to read any of these books, or if you decided to pull these off of your TBR, because I hated them, because to be fair, I hated most of the books that I've read so far this month. Yay! Let's hope the back half of the month is better, and make sure you subscribe if you would like to see the books that I read in the back half of the month, or you just generally want to hang out with me again, because I want to hang out with you again. See you next time.